Tonight is our second class of MELS 603, and I want to go over a few things. I've realized within the last week from a few emails that I've got that there's some questions I need to clear up. First of all, each of you has 2 or 3 people that are working with you through this program. You have a clinical coach 1. The clinical coach 1 comes out to your school and visits you the first semester that you are in the program. They meet your principal. They go over what is expected in the internship and all of that. And they try to do it very early in the semester. Now, the other 2 semesters, those same people will reach out to you, but you will probably just touch bases with them through Zoom or through email or whatever way that they choose to do it. But they don't usually come out to your school unless you're having issues with a principal or a supervisor who's not letting you do things. And then if you need them to come out and try to work out issues, then they will. Or if the principal or the person who is your supervisor lets them know that there are some issues and they need to come and talk with you. So that's one of the people. The second person you have for this semester is Dr. Tillman. Dr. Tillman, wave. And she's your clinical coach too. And then I'm the third person that you have this semester, and I'm your instructor for 603. Now, I think some of you all didn't have clear distinctions on who does what because they sort of team talk last semester. So what I do is I have the blackboard for 603, and that gives you a letter grade. And as soon as I'm sure we've got most of the assignments put in, then I will tell you the number of points it takes for an A. Usually it's 250 or 300 points.
Open the door.
Maximum. So
Jules can drop you off on the way out. I'm in the middle of class.
Okay, if someone
ask him before he leaves.
If some of you
downstairs
that's talking, hearing a lot of talk to family members, I think. So anyway, I give the grade, and you get 6 units, 6 semester hours of credit. It's basically the same thing as 2 classes. And so that's where that is. Dr. Tillman is responsible for giving you a grade on the internship.
You drop him by the way out.
Competency folio.
You don't have to put Joel in bed. I'll get Joel to bed. Just
All
go.
Right. I'm still hearing some. Okay, hopefully that will help. So anyway, she is responsible for the competency folio. She's responsible for the internship. Any dispositions that you have to do, she's responsible for that. So all of those pieces that go into helping you get your hours of credit for your internship, you're responsible to Dr. Tillman for that. I will introduce your tasks, and then Dr. Tillman will take over and help you finalize them. Now, the other thing that I wanted to go over, because I think there's a question about it, because I'm not sure that everybody knows where they're supposed to put the assignments. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Hopefully it will work again. It did last week, which was a wonderful thing. All right. Can you see my screen now? Can everybody see it? All right. If you go to the discussion board, and actually that link is in your weeks, you don't have to go to them. But if you're looking for where things are to be posted, under discussion board, it says the OMA Task 1 for peer review, OMA Task 2 for peer review. All right, these are, and then the OMA 3 and the SCIP and the CAP. Those are where I can see them and your peer reviewer sees them. So that's your draft. That's the first one that you do. Now then, there's 2 other things that go with the task. The peer review for evaluation, once you complete your peer review, you get it back to the person it goes to. But where it comes to me is under the OMA Task 1 and it is under assignment Dropbox. So it says task 1, peer review for evaluation. That's where you post the one written one that you do. Then when you've made all of your revisions, the ones from your peer reviewer, from Dr. Tillman, and from me, then you will post it under the OMA Task 1 for evaluation. That should be your final piece of the puzzle. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood where to put them, because I wasn't sure that they did. One other thing that I need to make sure that you're aware of is discussion boards are what the university, and I'm going to stop sharing because I've shown you what I wanted to make sure you knew. The discussion boards are what the university uses to for us to take attendance. So you need to make sure you do one of those per week to make sure we know you're in class. Kelly, did you have a question?
Something that looks different from last semester to this semester is when we're on the new when we're on here, like on the side, we don't have a place, or I don't have a place that says discussion board. No, I do under each week. Is that where it's at?
Yes, that's where it is.
Okay, so that's different from last semester though, right?
It is different from last semester, and what has happened is Dr. Lamb posted all of the stuff to our shells that we were supposed to be teaching. Some of the things copied and some of the things didn't. So I made sure, I saw that the discussion board was missing from one group, but it's there for the other group. So what I made sure is you had a link each week that would get you there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, one other thing which made me think of something. If you go back, and let me see if it's going to let me do that. Yes. All right. If you'll also look at the tools from the top, it says discussion board. And then a lot of times, this is actually what I use, but let's see if this will follow through. CAP task 1 for peer review. Actually, that's, just forget I said that, because that's not going to help you all at all. That's going to take you into where I create them rather than where you can pull them up. But I was thinking that it allowed you to do that, but it's not going to do that. So let me get out of that. Okay, so does that get your question answered, Kelly? Okay. All right, did anyone else have a question right there? Anyone else?
I had a question about the template. Where do we locate the last semester we had a template for peer reviews. Do we use a template, or are we just doing a narrative on Word and then submitting that?
No, you're following that same template, and I'm trying to remember exactly where it was. I know it is in your information, and it may be in the part where it's talking about the peer reviews, and it gives you the process. It may be there. I'm thinking that's where it is. But like I said, some things copied and some things didn't. But I'm pretty sure I checked, and each one of you has that. But it's under one of those side tabs that talks about the process for the peer reviews. I think it's that. I'll double check later on, and then I'll send you an email if that's not where it is.
It's under peer review process.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, you said it's the same template from last semester?
Very same template. Nothing has changed as far as that. The only thing that's changed is you don't have to do as many, and you don't have to Zoom about them. So, but it's the very same written narrative form. Any other questions while we're talking about those things? All right.
My question was not about the peer review, but I put it on the chat. On a weekly basis, when you say complete the discussion board questions, can we do any of them in any order on a weekly basis, or should we go in order from the way that you have it on there?
Just make sure you do one of them each week that's on there, because they're attached to the week. And
okay.
So
okay.
It doesn't matter to me what order you do them on that week, but I would try to match the week up so that at least one of them is done. That brings me to something that is really, really important. there's 3 people who have not, as of yesterday afternoon, completed the enrollment verification activity. And if you do not complete that, then they have told us that they don't want us to count you present, even if you have turned in assignments. So it is really important that the 3 people who have not completed that get that done very quickly, because we're going to soon have to verify the class rolls. So that is extremely important. And like I said, as of yesterday afternoon, 3 people had not completed them. So I sent an email last week, and several people got it done, got it completed. And then this week I double checked, and there 3 people still hadn't. All right, let me look at your chat questions. All right, we've taken care of the template for the peer review, and we've taken care of that one. You post your draft in Dr. Tillman's class shell at the same time that you post it for me. And that way we both will get back to you just as quickly as we can. So yes, the answer is you do it in her shell, however she has told you to do that. All right.
I'm still in Dr. Crawford's shell. I don't have Dr. Tillman for my internship.
That's good information to have. She needs to send that information to Dr. Lamb.
Okay.
Kira is not in your class shell. She's still in Dr. Crawford. So
I think she is. Maybe she's in both. I don't know why that would be.
But if you'll double check on that one, please.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is anybody else in the same situation? Okay. All right.
Too.
What?
Terry, I keep getting things from Dr. Crawford.
I don't know why.
Okay.
This is Samanja. I'm getting things from him. And I've emailed, and his last email said that it was a mistake and we should no longer be getting those emails. And like 10 minutes later, I got another one. So I think he's aware of it.
Is there a possibility that he is your clinical coach 1, any of you?
No.
No.
I think he just hasn't redone his email list.
Okay. All right.
That may be the problem.
Well, if you get them from Dr. Crawford, he's been assigned, he's actually teaching a class and he's been assigned to others. So you ignore, like he told, was it Carrie that he told to ignore? Just ignore anything that you get from him. If he's not your clinical coach 1, you don't need to worry about his information. Dr. Lamb he thought he had got it fixed. So evidently he has not gotten it fixed. So
he has sent multiple emails, I think, to everyone, to the group, saying, if you are in Dr. Todd's class, you have me as your coach. And Dr. Lamb is the man who knows. So that's where we are. Yeah.
Speaking of Dr. Lamb, I got an email about a town hall tomorrow evening at 6 for legacy candidates.
Yes.
I wasn't sure what that meant.
That means anybody who's done 601. Okay.
So that is us tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
You will actually get an invitation from him 5 minutes before. He does not send them out ahead of time. He sends them 5 minutes to 6 o'clock. And he wants to just go over the whole process and talk with everybody at one time. And I'm sure he'll do the same thing that we do, is record it and then allow you to look at it if you have church or you have other activities, and you can't do that. So yes, that is something that you will need to be aware of, and you'll need to try to attend if you can. So that's a good question. All right, anything else before we go on? All right, I've covered the first part, and I think I'm down to the OMA Task 2, which is the instructional capacity building. All right, now, some of you have asked about a template. One of the things that Dr. Lamb had told us was that He wanted to wean you off of templates because he was expecting you to look at the description and the rubric. However, I have learned that there's actually a template in Dr. Tillman's class. It's in her shell. He did not load it in ours, but he loaded it in hers. I looked over that template today, and it is no more than the same things that I've been telling you. It may be phrased a little bit more. It's going right back to the description, and it's going right back to the rubric. So that is all that it is. But it is in Dr. Tillman's class shell, if you really want to follow that. Now, one of the things that I know has been said, and I want to go ahead and address with this. A lot of task 2 can come from things you've already done in the APTEL, possibly even your school profile, and possibly even some of the information that you may have used to identify gaps in possibly part of the APSL. We're not wanting you to reinvent the wheel. What we suggest is you copy and paste the appropriate parts. Most of it will probably come from the APTEL Task 1, 2, and 3, or possibly the school profile. So you can use that. But what some of you have noticed as you've been working on this is the rubric does not match exactly what you did in those 3 tasks. That's why I say copy and paste and add. So we never know who's going to be the evaluator, and all they're going to have to look at is the actual rubric. And so we want to make sure that we cover the information that's there. So of any of the things that you've done, copy, paste, and then fill in. Do make sure that you take off any references to the APTEL and the APSL, though. This is a different task. So we don't want somebody to think that all you did was copy and paste and you didn't even take time to read it and make sure that the information you needed was there. So just as we look at what they're asking for, you're actually to be working with your principal again, and you're looking at how to design to improve student achievement, looking at your district and state initiatives, your state and federal laws, and it includes the exceptional learners and special needs populations. Now, that may not have been clearly addressed. That may be part of it. It was not clearly addressed in the APTEL. I think it wanted you to talk a little bit about exceptional children, but maybe not to the length that you're talking about here. So you are to include your needs assessment, and that can come from what you did earlier. You are to analyze the compliance issues, and you may have done some of that already. And then some of the formative assessment instruments and procedures, the staff development, you may have already done that. So you copy and you paste, and then you make it fit the rubric the way it asked for. And then you're to develop a proposal that details a plan of action, and it's approved and monitored by your site mentor. Now this you may have done in your action plan. And if you did, you copy and paste. Then the prompt specifically says you're to develop a plan for instructional capacity building that features depth of knowledge in each of the following areas. Now, when I say capacity building, what's that sound like to you? What are we talking about? Take a stab at it. You're not necessarily going to be right or wrong.
Teachers, building teacher capacity.
Yes, yes. So that can translate over to what? Staff development and mentors in your school that are working with new teachers, or teachers are having issues, and maybe your principal is a mentor to some of the teachers that's having issues, or you have an instructional coach that's working with them. So you're helping your teachers become stronger people and stronger in the classroom teaching, what they're supposed to be teaching. So that's what you're looking at. And it says a formal program proposal approved by the site mentor that strategically and specifically addresses the 4 types of instructional resources used to build instructional capacity. And so as you look at that, then the second part, the needs assessment, a lot of that you've already done because you're looking at state, federal, and local compliance matters, and especially those related to EC. That may be where you have to add a little bit more information. You may have to do some about the AIG. You may have to add some about the ELL if you didn't go into it earlier. The 504 plans that students have, a lot of those fall under other health impaired as well. So look at all, you don't just look at EC, meaning those who are educationally handicapped in some form or fashion. It can be in other areas that they're not completely identified as an EC child. It may be AIG, it may be ELL, it may be 504. So make sure you look at all that and make sure, again, if you covered it really well and were very detailed in what you turned in originally, you probably have most of it. But if you find pieces missing, fill them in. And then it talks about a formative assessment plan. I know you all worked on that. And then a detailed plan for your professional development activities. I know you did that. It also asks for resources within the budget to address those particular concerns. And then it goes into more and more about the lawful services and rights of exceptional learners and all special needs populations. So all of those have to be addressed in depth to be proficient. So again, this one should be fairly easy for you to do because you copy and paste a lot of it. You just fill in where you've got pieces that are missing. And Dr. Tillman, would you like to add what you're talking, where it mentions the 4 types of instructional resources, if you
Yeah.
what you recommend there?
Well, I'm going to say that if I were writing this paper and the people that did this the last time I went by it, they wrote a paragraph that actually addressed those 4 things, and they just pull the information. If you think about, if you did a good job in the APTL, you've got a significant amount. And a lot of you, if you had a choice between doing one thing and doing an exceptional child group or a population, I really poked you trying to get you to do the exceptional child thing because of this. So you might already have a lot of that done. But I think you need to address the instructional knowledge, instructional tools or materials, and instructional relationships and organizational structure as like a summary after you put your plan together, because you can just go and look at the plan and pull out what of that is resources and what of that is instruction. So you can meet that very clearly, but you've got to have that EC stuff. And if you did a good job last time, you're going to be glad you did, because you're going to have a lot of it already done. Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you have any particular questions for either of us about task 2? I noticed one of you had asked, will you give us an outline like you did last week? I'm assuming that's to Dr. Tillman?
Last week we held hands and I made them talk through. I believe they all have an outline, and if they don't, shame on them.
Okay.
But they're going to give me an outline tomorrow. We're going to talk, and they're going to be much more talkative than they are right now, I hope, or they won't end up with an outline, because we're going to do the outline.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions about task 2? All right. I'm doing these week by week because I don't want you to get so far ahead that one is not in your brain while you're working on it. So that's one of the reasons I meet early in the week, so you have the rest of the week to work on it. And if there's some time that we wind up, if we wind up not meeting for some reason, then I may double up on them that way. And one of the things I need to make sure I say, assume we will meet every Tuesday. If there's, except that there's 2 in there, like spring break and Easter break, that there is no Zoom conference. And if I wind up seeing that they're not needed, I will cancel them. But at the same time, make the assumption that we will have them. So, all right, anything else right now?
Well, I think that the person who's on the iPhone said she had a question. Is that right? I have a question, but it can wait until it's not for the majority. You don't know if it's the majority unless you ask the question.
Feel free to
ask your question.
Feel free to ask the question.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'm at the airport. I know Dr. Todd, I sent your emails. And I went to Florida to see my mom. I'm on my way back.
That's
but actually, my question is actually, I believe it is for the minority dealing with my situation, being that I am no longer in the school that I first started the program with. So
okay.
I'm in a different school.
All right.
So
for most of the people, what I have recommended, because you're not the only one in that situation, I have recommended once you get there to start using the data from the place that you did. But for the OMA, since so much of it's based on the school where you were, especially task 2, you may want to continue using the information from where you were, because you're going to have to start all over if you use the new school. So do what is easiest for you. Does that help?
Yes, I think.
All right, do what's easiest for you. If it was not that you needed to use some of the information for task 2 of the OMA that you did last semester, I would say start with your new school. But where you're having to rely on your past information, just continue. And you probably have a good enough relationship with that former school that you can get whatever else information you need. And you probably know it so well that you can just go ahead and do that. So I would try to stay with where I had, if I had to read information, and then go to a new one whenever it is a possibility that you're going to be in a setting where you don't have to have new information or old information. Use your old information.
I agree.
Okay, is that help?
Yes, ma'am. And just for the OMA, right, Dr. Todd was
Yes.
talking about just, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. All right. And I've already talked about this part, a reminder. Now, one of the things that I want to do for the last little part of our session is, when you all think about a principal, you all think of what? Tell me what you think about when you think about a principal's job. What is their job? What do you see them doing on a daily basis?
They run the school. They're in charge of and responsible for everything that happens at the school.
That's exactly right. They are responsible for everything that happens in the school. I'm sorry?
It's okay. I think of them as like the captain of the ship. They make sure that we are heading in the direction that we need to head, and keep us on course.
Good. That's a very good way to think about it. Somebody else? Well, one of the things that you're going to be learning this year is what the law says that the principals are to do. And Dr. Lamb came up with a list of things that are somewhat in the law and somewhat understood. And if you look at your agenda, you can go through these. First of all, they supervise teachers and other school staff. And they're responsible usually for helping to hire the teachers in their school. Now, sometimes you share teachers or you share personnel, so they're not always responsible for hiring, but in a lot of situations they are. They are to observe and monitor teachers to evaluate how effective the teachers are. And they are to help the teachers improve their teaching skills by arranging staff development programs and mentorships. Now, that one is really important, and a lot of times we don't think that that's the principal's job. And a lot of times, if you have an instructional coach, that's the person who usually takes that job over. But in a small school, in a rural county, you're most likely not going to have those instructional coaches that's going to be at your school every day. And even if they are in your school once in a while, they're not going to be there to know how things are going each and every day in the classroom. And so someone has to step up and do that. If the principal's not going to do it and there happens to be an assistant principal, then they can help out with that. But someone needs to be a good, strong instructional leader, and that doesn't always need to be the instructional coach. Sometimes it has to be the principal. Sometimes the assistant, there is no assistant principal, and the principal is the only school administrator in the school. And so they have to be able to do everything. The next piece deals with budget. Ensure that staff have the tools and resources they need to do their jobs effectively. Discipline students and help teachers manage students' behavior. That one you sort of know, but one of the things I really want to point out to you, and it took a long time for my teachers to understand this. There's very few things that a principal or even a superintendent can do to children that you as a classroom teacher can't do. And once you give away your power and your authority, then the students know that. And so sometimes your life gets more difficult rather than less difficult. The principal can suspend, which you can't do. The principal can recommend expulsion, which you can't do. But the principal can't even expel. That goes through the superintendent or the superintendent's designee at the central office. There is a law about how long you teach students. For example, if you teach them until they're 18 years old, or if they are handicapped, 21. So you have to be aware of the laws and realize what group you're working with, and that what you think is true may not actually be the best way of looking at it. So, think about it when you become a principal. You want to help your teachers, but at the same time, they need to have good classroom management, because if you have a teacher that is very weak in classroom management and they send their children to you all the time, first of all, then they've given their authority away, and the children are with you instead of in the classroom, and so they're not getting the teaching that they need. So you need to be really careful about that. And so but that takes a long time to train teachers, because teachers think, well, if I can't get this child to behave, I'll just send them to the office. That works okay for part of the time, but it can't become an everyday situation. And it needs to be for the severe things. It doesn't need to be the kids talking in class and I can't get him to be quiet. I mean, it really needs to be some pretty major things if you want to give away your authority. So I just bring that's probably a different way of looking at it from anything you've ever looked at before. But I wanted to make sure that we said that, because you're going into a role where you will be looking at things differently. And then the next part is review test scores and other data to assess the school's progress. Now that's a pretty new way of looking at things. Many times there is stuff that the principal will say, okay, I'm going to hand this over to the testing coordinator and they're going to look at it. the principal really needs to be aware of what's going on in his or her school, and they shouldn't be surprised when it's reported in the newspaper after the end of a testing session and it's been approved by the state level. So they need to know what is going on, and that's where they also need to target their budget. If there's something that's really low and it's the school focus, then that's where the budget needs to be being targeted. The next one deals with the school's budget and finances. Let me tell you that if you do not follow appropriate accounting procedures, that can be one of the quickest ways to get you fired. Anything to do with money that's not handled correctly, and the other one is inappropriate student and teacher relationships. Those are the two that will get you fired just as quickly as anything. And sometimes you will be crucified in the Facebook media and before anything else, and there may not be any truth to it. But people on Facebook do not have to deal with the truth because you can't make them tell the truth. And you know, that's why you have to be really careful about what you read and what you believe. I have gotten to the point, I have read things on Facebook, and I'm not against Facebook, but I have read things on Facebook from classmates that I had, or my classmates in high school, and I'm thinking, you would have never said this to a person face to face. And if you wouldn't say it face to face, then it probably should not be written. And I just never comment. I may wish somebody a happy birthday. I may, but I don't even put likes. I just look at it and move on, and I think, okay, the least interaction I can have with this crowd, the better off I'm going to be, because it just shows a thinking process that is foreign from mine. And so, you know, I encourage you to be careful about Facebook, be careful about trusting it. And also any media that you use, make sure you're careful how you use that media. I will tell you that in my experience, the local reporters, generally, the ones who don't have a beef, and you'll recognize those real quickly because they will write everything with a slant to it, and never is it going to be accurate. But most of when it gets to the TV stations, those reporters are fairly professional. And then your major journalists on television that are with NBC, CBS, those major are usually fairly accurate. They really try to be accurate, and they try to present the information. And that's also true of your local TV stations. Those folks have been trained in how to be a good reporter and not biased. Not always, but most of the time. So you have to know who you're dealing with. Because if you don't know who you're dealing with, you can wind up being the one that gets shortchanged. Ensure the school's facilities are safe for students and staff. Now that's the facilities itself. But one of the other pieces that you all are having to deal with goes back to the media. And it goes back to Facebook, where you're dealing with bullying. And those are things that years ago we didn't even have to deal with because nobody had a Facebook account. And I think now most of the students don't use Facebook, they use something else. What, Snapchat or something? Yeah. So
Twitter.
What?
Twitter,
yes. So, you know, you have to be careful. And if you catch any of those situations where there seems to be bullying, you know, you have to get with your principal and find out exactly what's the best way to handle it, and make sure, I mean, if there's any possibility, it can be cyberbullying and can be brought into the school. You have an obligation to deal with it, but you don't deal with it by yourself. That's when you call for help from your administration. And then if they have any issues with how to deal with it, they can contact their central office, and then their central office can contact the lawyer if they need to. You are to advocate on behalf of the school for necessary financial support. Now that piece I want you to think about. I have had the opportunity, and I do consider it an opportunity, and to have worked with principals who only saw their school. It did not matter that you had limited resources. They wanted what they wanted, and they never did recognize that they were part of a big system. Well, one of the things that you've got to do is realize that it is limited resources, and every year it gets more and more limited. And while you are to advocate for what is best for your school, you also have an obligation to work with your central office staff, because they're trying to make it work for everybody. And so every school principal cannot get what they want because there's a limited supply of money. So you just need to be aware that you're a good team player, as well as you don't give away everything, but sometimes you may swap something for something else that another principal might really need worse than you, and you might need something else. So, remember, you do advocate, but also realize that you are part of a team, and that team is your school system, not just your school. Of course, the next part is you manage the overall operation of schools, including building maintenance and cafeteria services. You set and oversee academic standards and ensure that teachers have the tools and resources needed to meet standards. And that's supposed to be serve as the public face of the school, not the public fact, but it would help to be factual when you are the public face of the school. Then job duties may vary by the size of the school and the school district. The one thing that the state law does say is that you grade and classify students. So while you're not going to be giving the actual grade, if there is a grade dispute, you have to deal with it. But it is your job to make sure a grade is given for the students. You look at grades, classroom work, standardized tests to consider whether the student moves to the next grade level. That is partly your choice. Now, one of the things that I used to do, and it depends on the school that you go to. I went to a school as a principal that did not give very high grades to anybody. They were really hard on the children. And I know why they did it. It was a depressed, rural, economic area. And one of the teachers, one of the main teachers that did this, she had grown up in not exactly poverty, but she had grown up in a depressed economic area. And she was determined those kids were going to get out of that area, and they were going to do better than what normally happened in their families. So she was really hard on them, but that also transferred over to a feeling among the whole staff. Well, one of the things that I had to do that first year is we had to change the mindset that these children can do and these children will learn, and we've got to be a little more careful and not beat them up. And so I started checking every teacher's report card grades when they went home. I let them give the grades, but then I would write notes like, oh, good, this number made an A, and this number made B's, and this number made C's. And it made them aware of that it was saying about them. So that's one of the things that you have to be really cautious about. If you happen to inherit a school that everybody is making D's and F's, the teachers need to change their way of thinking, because those children deserve to see some A's and some B's and some C's. They need to be told that they can do. You're not changing your standards, because your end game is to get them to pass the test at the end of the year, but you're trying to get them to believe in themselves. I used to, as a principal, I gave a certificate for improved grades. I went to, after every 9 weeks, I took the grades from the previous 9 weeks, and then I looked at them, and if the child improved, they still may not have made the A honor roll or the B honor roll, but if they had improved, I gave them a certificate. And for some of the children, it's the first one they'd ever had in their life. So you've got to build your children up as much as you do your staff. So that's one that when you have to look at where you're sent as the principal and assistant principal and figure out how to work with that. I can't tell you, and no one can. And what the previous principal did may not have worked too well. So you've got to add your personality and try to help make that turn. Now, I will tell you that I don't think you can turn a school around in 2 years. I think it takes 4 to 5 years to completely turn a school around. And I don't think our legislators give schools long enough to make that change. But in my experience, it's taken 4 to 5 years to make the turn. And then that principal may need to leave and go to another school to start it turning. And then another good solid one comes in behind you and they just go flying. And the example I'll give you is that the school that I went to, because I had, they weren't doing really well. They should have been, but they weren't. But the kids had given up on themselves. After about the 3rd year, they started improving. Now, they would be up and down and up and down. But about the 3rd year, they improved. By the 4th year in the school, we had the highest writing scores in the county at the 6th grade level. And our students were doing well. But then I moved to another district and I moved to a central office job. The person who came in behind me really kept moving. And the last few years, that school has had 90% or better of their students on grade level every year. They started out at 50 and 60%, but they improved every year. And then I think by the 3rd or 4th principal, it's just maintain and keep them at the 90%. So it can happen, but you have to get your people to believe that it can happen too. Another one that's extremely important is the accurate reports that's required by the school district. I can tell you that as a superintendent, I always knew that one principal was always going to be late in everything. And I would have to call, or actually I quit calling and I asked my secretary to do it and just ask, has this report been turned in yet? Of course it hadn't, but you get tired of it. It's just like you have to think of yourself the way you as a teacher think. When you become a principal, you're just the teacher of all of the teachers in your building. And so the same things that occur in your classroom are going to happen in your building. Same thing is true when you get to the central office level. So, there are things that you should be doing. If you're supposed to get a report to your school district, you need to do it, and it needs to be accurate. And then helping teachers improve their instruction. We've talked about that a little bit. This next one is extremely important and should have probably been first, but I didn't make this list. I took it off of Dr. Lamb's list. Conduct fire drills and inspect for fire hazards during the first week of school. That is a law in North Carolina, and I suspect it is in most states. So you have to conduct a fire drill in the first week of school. And there is to be an inspection for fire hazards. And you also do a fire drill each month of the school year. And you document it. And usually you send in a report to someone at the central office that you have done that. So there will be some time that the fire inspector for the county will come and visit your school. And when the fire inspector came to my school the first year, I'd been in schools and we had never had any issues, but I really had not taken the time, it was so early in the year, to walk around and see what we were doing. Well, he comes into my office and he said, "Ma'am, if you don't get this fixed, I will have you in jail." And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what is it we've got to fix? I assure you we will fix it. Now, not all of them's going to have that personality, but he did. And you have to learn to work with them. It doesn't matter. They've got their job to do, and that was his way of telling me that we're doing something that we shouldn't be doing. Well, sure enough, we were. They were putting chains around the door instead of having an operating locking door. And so you can't do that if children are in the building, you know. If everybody is out, I guess you could get by with it, but it's much better to do it the right way. So anyway, he was right. And so we fixed it very quickly. So I think he gave us 2 to 3 weeks before he would come back. And then he didn't like anything hanging from the ceiling. So I had to get my teachers to remove everything that was hanging from the ceiling. He said that was a fire hazard, which it is. But some people will let you get by with it, others won't. You deal with the person you're dealing with, and it doesn't matter how much you want to fuss about it. We had one fire inspector to tell us to get rid of any kind of furniture that was upholstered, because some of our teachers had used some of the ideas of bringing in like sofas and those kinds of things in the classroom for middle grade students because they learned better. This one came in and like said, first of all, it's dirty. Secondly, get rid of it. Third, it doesn't need to be in here. It's a fire hazard. Well, I don't care how much you complain or how much your teachers hate it. You got to do it. They are over you when it comes to that. Now, you can try to have a meeting of the minds, but that's not always going to happen. And then protecting school property, reporting. Now, this is a really important one. Report to the appropriate law enforcement agency and the superintendent of any incidents against the law that occur on school property. All right, anytime that you think something is going on that is inappropriate, you call the law enforcement agency and they will come and investigate. You do not try to hamper it. You turn it over to them, but you also need to report it. And then if they feel that they're too closely tied because they were an SRO there to the school and it involves a faculty member, they'll probably call in the SBI. So do not be concerned about that piece. That's just the way that's their call to make, not yours. And then you're to make available school budgets and school improvement plans. You evaluate your licensed employees. You develop mandatory improvement plans. You transfer student records. Now, this is really important. When students move, it's your responsibility to make sure that the records go with them. But the other schools should be asking for them, not the parents of the children. If you are high school, then you are to sign driving eligibility certificates and you notify the Division of Motor Vehicles when the students meet the appropriate requirements. You are also to make sure that you have a school improvement team, and those are to be done yearly, and there is a process for how this team is picked. And one of the things I have learned is not everybody follows the process that's outlined in the law. So that's something that probably needs to be looked at. And then this last one has been added since we've had so many of our family members of children that are in the military. Address the unique needs of students with immediate family members serving in the military. So that is another really important thing, and that's sort of a new thing. Now, the other thing that we've got about 7 minutes. So the last thing I want to have you look at, if there's nothing that's important to you other than looking at the law section and then working with the media, you can get yourself in more hot water by saying something to a reporter than you would ever imagine. So you need to be careful about what you say when you're in public, when you're at the grocery store, when you are at a ball game. You're the face of the school. They know you. You may not know who you're talking to, but you don't talk about teachers. You don't talk about students. You never name people individually. And if they ask you a question about your school, you try to dodge it the best way you can, unless it is something that you've had an opportunity to think through. And, you know, sometimes if you know nothing about it, just say, you know, I can't answer that right now. I need to do some research because I'm not aware of what you're talking about. Be honest, but don't be forthcoming with information that's going to hit the TV tonight that's going to make you sound really foolish in your whole school and school system. So the first thing is be careful what you say. Always let your school district superintendent or assistant superintendent that you work with know what's happened and ask them what you should say, and get some guidance from them, because they probably dealt with it more than you will have, especially when you start. If you say this is off the record, it may not be. Don't ever assume that they're going to honor being off the record. So just don't say it. Give facts only, and try to focus your message to keep it legal and to keep you out of liability situation, because that can happen if you're not real careful. If you're going to be on television with a reporter asking you questions, practice, especially if you haven't done it before. And that way you'll be better prepared and you'll feel better about it. But in many situations, you're not going to want to answer the exact question they ask. You're going to want to frame the question and turn it around. And now a good reporter is going to keep coming back to you with the same question, but you just try to turn it around and focus it in the manner that you want to. And then if you can't, you eventually just say, I'm not at liberty to discuss this, but when I can, I will get in touch with you. And so, it's okay to say, I don't know, but you also, it's going to be reported that you did not return their calls. So what is worse, to report you didn't return their calls or to report that you said the wrong thing? I would say that you didn't return their calls is not as bad as saying the wrong thing. So just make sure that when you're talking with reporters, you know what you're doing, you know the law, and you know what happened. And be honest, but don't give any information that can come back and you be sued for. So with that, do you have any questions? And does that help you think about the job you're getting ready to go into? It's a pretty awesome job. But I will tell you that I loved being a school principal. That's the one job out of the many that I've had that I loved. And I had so much fun with it, because I would make sure that we worked hard, but then we played hard at the end of the year after testing was over too. We found a time to play, and it never hurt our kids. They had fun with it. And I had faculty that enjoyed the students as well. And so we did faculty ball games, and we did faculty and student ball games, and faculty and student dances, and those kinds of things. So, and the kids just loved it if you did something together as a faculty. So any other questions? Okay, then I look forward to seeing your task 1s and your task 2. Now, Sheila, yes ma'am.
Yes, I have one question on OMA Task 1, the operations. Under that, is that talking about exceptional learners? And
all right, I've got to go back and look and see what the rubric says. You said the operations?
Yeah, the operations topic category.
Operations is usually talking about the processes of making sure the schedule is there and everybody's in the right place, but I'm not finding exactly what you're talking about when I'm looking. Now, I'm just looking at the rubric right now.
We
Okay,
talked about it.
I see it.
Dr. Todd, we talked about it in as far as maintaining an effective staff, and that would be, making sure people are teaching the right thing and they know how to teach it, and all that kind of thing, and how that is affected by teacher turnover rate. So that's some data they could throw into the mix, and hiring the right people for the jobs you've got, and that kind of stuff.
And then operations too can be, in addition to that, it is who is in charge of duties. It's your duty roster to make sure you've got everything covered. Because if you don't have everything covered, then there's a liability issue that can come up. And so while a lot of times teachers complain about the duty rosters, if they don't do them, then that leaves a hole that can come back and your school be sued, or your school system be sued. So operations deals with the things Dr. Tillman said, but it's also the mundane of making sure your schedules move smoothly and that you have people that are in place for when kids are going from one place to another. They're not college age yet, so you can't just send them out and assume they're going to behave. You've got to have teachers in the halls, and you've got to have teachers helping them get to the cafeterias and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot. So does that help?
Yes.
One of the things that we sort of pulled out of the definitions and stuff, we tended to put the scheduling issues under management routine. So it'll be in, you know, I think the scheduling, that's why we didn't have it there. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I do have a question.
Okay.
I don't really see, or maybe I just haven't found it, like a schedule for like when the case studies are due.
They're in the weeks.
Okay.
They're in the weeks. All of that is in the week. And what I did was I put the case studies in the week where you are reading that material. And so they're not in order 1, 2, 3, 4. I think one of them is around week 6 or 7, maybe 5. But that's where you will find them.
Okay. Thank you.
I think maybe the first one is, I think it is week 5, but right now I can't get
6. It's 6.
week.
I just found it.
Yeah, it's week.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, Tiffany.
Hey, so Dr. Tillman, with the comparative analysis that you said to add as one of the subjects, we're comparing it against the schools that are similar to ours in the district, or we're looking at schools across the state? I'm hoping the district, because
well, it's going to be district, state, and fed. You know, if that data is available, because it says in the rubric that you're doing comparisons with the district, other schools like yours, the state.
So are we just looking at performance data, or what else, other information are we looking at to compare?
You're looking at all that stuff that we went through.
Mm-hmm.
If there is data available, the data that are in the various, remember we listed all those places you could find data?
Yes.
If that data gives you comparisons, you should include it.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Dr. Todd, I wanted to ask about the case study.
Yes, ma'am.
Not the case study, I'm sorry. The discussion board for the crisis plan. Do you have a length of the response that you want for that?
No. That's a good question about the discussion board, because someone had a question about it. First of all, we're not making you respond to other people's discussion boards. So it's your answers, but remember, it's on discussion board. Anybody can read them. So if you see one that's really interesting to you, respond to it. Or if you see one that you think maybe is not quite the right direction, respond to that. I would say for the first one, because it's asking you to find the information and to make sure that you have it and things are covered, paragraph. You know, that I'm not looking for a lengthy paper on any of these. I'm just wanting the question answered and that you know where to look. You've got to convince me you know where to look. Okay? Does that help?
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions? All right, y'all have a great week, and I don't know whether you're in a place they're calling for possible freezing rain in the morning or not, but if you are, and listen to the news and be careful, and I hope that you have a really good week the rest of the week. So I'm going to end the meeting for all of us.
All right, thank you.
Get those papers in.
That's right.